There is only darkness for you, and only death for your people.
I mean, if you make it to that island, you might find out some pretty heavy stuff. About the humans, and where you came from, about yourself.
You've been gone for so long.
Adventure Time Islands is a story about how humanity recovers from the disaster of the Mushroom War. And for the next few videos, I'll go over each route humanity takes in their attempt to make a better life than the ones they knew. If you haven't seen Islands yet, I strongly suggest you watch the show up to that point. It really is one of the highlights of the series and explores the events of human life on MOREAU. So first, a little background. In the Stakes miniseries, we see a man named Two Bread Tom. Tom and other humans are attempting to escape MOREAU to flee from the nuclear fallout conditions, mainly vampires and the abnormal weather. Tom and his tribe of humans depart from MOREAU, eventually arriving at an island they would call Founders Island. Once the humans have settled on the island, some of them decide to take different paths. These decisions are represented by the 4 different islands, and to ensure their safety, they build a guardian. The guardian keeps people in and danger out, the sacrifice of freedom that many were willing to make in the years after the mushroom bombs. After hundreds of years, only a few people ever escaped the islands. 2 of those people were Finn and Susan, who both ended up back on MOREAU. Over a decade after their arrival on MOREAU, human technology makes contact with these lost citizens. In episode 1, we see an advanced transport robot find Finn and identify him as being from the Mertens line. Jake smashes it in, but the ship gives BMO a signal about the origin of it. This allows him to print out a map leading Finn and Susan to islands believed to still be inhabited by humans. Finn and Susan feel the need to find out what these islands contain. It is agreed that they will set sail in search of answers. During this episode, I also feel that Princess Bubblegum knows more than she is letting on. She's not very enthusiastic about the party going to the islands, saying that she doesn't even know what's out there, but I think she has some idea. After all, Marceline and Bubblegum should have the most knowledge about what happened to the humans, but they never really talk about it. Marceline knows about Two Bread Tom setting sail for a new place to live, and might have told Bubblegum at some point. They're likely just trying to shelter Finn from the depressing truth about his people. But Finn doesn't want to be sheltered anymore. He's growing up and searching for answers. And throughout this miniseries, there is a large theme of sheltering people from the truth and from danger. The first scene is even a little girl telling a doll it is too dangerous to leave the sandcastle. Despite the risks, Susan and Finn just have to know what's out there. Not many people in MOREAU could relate to what they were feeling. Many of the main cast is unique in some way, but they all know a little about their origins. Finn and Susan don't. Finn only remembers being on that leaf, abandoned, and being found, and Susan's memory has been hijacked by a brain chip. So they set sail in search of answers. Alright, this video is going to take a quick detour to talk about Episode 2 and the Odyssey. Episode 2 is definitely the weakest from the miniseries, but I still enjoy the nautical aspects. Seeing different versions of ocean mythology is also cool. For example, the creatures that latch onto Jake make him hallucinate and steer off course, similar to sirens. And on old sea maps, including a map of MOREAU, there are sea monsters similar to the one we meet in this episode. The perils of the ocean present a similar theme to that of the Odyssey. Finn is lost and wandering in a physical and mental way. He was technically trying to go home, too, just as Odysseus was. There's even an ancient Greek word for this type of trip, nostos. Nostos usually involves the hero being shipwrecked and navigating through unknown locations in an attempt to return home. Successfully returning home is considered very heroic. In the Odyssey, a Cyclops blinded by the hero prays to Poseidon, and they become shipwrecked on an island of man-eating giants. In Adventure Time, the mechanical son of humans, with one operational eye, shipwrecks Finn, and he lands on an island with man-eating creatures. The Odyssey will come up a few more times in the series, but let's get back to the modern side of the story. So in Episode 3, Finn and Jake encounter their first island. It's called the Back to Nature Island. The aim of the island was to control the weather and the natural world for the benefit of the humans. This line of thinking makes sense. In much of the world, a nuclear winter was setting in. Snow and radiation was killing off the initial survivors of the mushroom bomb, and so the remaining humans attempted to gain control over the conditions. But at some point, everything went wrong. From the video Alva shows Finn, we know that the island began to lash out at the humans. Some were eaten by large animals, others were consumed by the weather conditions they helped to create. They died from the forces they were trying to hide from. One human from the island did live though, Alva. Alva is an old woman who speaks Swedish and has access to a lot of advanced technology, and it's through her that we see our first possible ending from the Mushroom War: isolation. What if humans were never able to recover from the weather or the exposure to animals? What if the changing climate was too extreme to conquer, or the new creatures too freakish to face? Something similar to what Alva's team of scientists experienced might happen. People would be picked off in a desperate attempt to find a new way. New technology helped the humans survive for a little while longer, but they ultimately suffered the same fate as those on MOREAU and in other places. Those that did survive would find themselves in a hostile world with a new enemy, loneliness. And like all the themes I'll discuss in this series, loneliness is relevant today more than ever. Never in our history have we been able to be so isolated. In the old world, dependence on other humans was required for survival. But now, an individual person can do everything from home. And with these advancements, a new wave of loneliness has come about. This is made even more relevant by the pandemic that just happened. People weren't going to school or work. People became more lonely and more depressed. They sat on YouTube, watching videos about stuff that's already happened, the same as Alva does. From the short time Alva is on screen, we see her show Finn videotapes of her old life. She wants to connect with him, but they're limited by a language barrier. When by herself, she spends time watching all these tapes, reminiscing about her life when others were around. The only thing she has for comfort is her pet Albert. Her life has become that of eating, hiding, and looking back to once was. Out of all the humans we see Finn meet, Alva is one with some meaningful connection. She lives in a tree and has a protective pet by her side. She also lives in the natural world, more so than that of people on the other islands. And Finn can almost understand that isolation within her. He was once thought to be the only human. The difference is he can't look back, as he doesn't know about the past or where he came from. When he learns about the other humans, it's all he thinks about. He's not necessarily lonely on MOREAU, but he is emotionally isolated from his species. That's why I love this scene with them together, watching the mistakes made by humans. Alva is physically isolated, while Finn's emotionally isolated. But they both know that something went wrong in the distant past that made them feel this way. And because of this, they have lost all control their species once had. Finn gets discouraged about the voyage after watching this, as he thinks he just witnessed the fate of humans. But once the storm stops, they go and find Jake, who is fighting off crabs. They're told that there are 3 more islands that BMO and Susan could have washed up on. The episode ends with a shot of BMO on the moon, looking at the Earth. It's a sneak peek into episode 4, and to look into the next route humanity takes.
Yeah, but it's all fake.
What's real? Your eyeballs think the sky is blue, but there's just sun rays spotting apart through the barf of our atmosphere. The sky is black.
In episode 4 of Adventure Time Islands, Finn and Jake reach the second of the 4 islands. What they find is a city left to ruin, but one that has advanced technology. They look around a bit before they find BMO. BMO is dancing and wearing a virtual reality headset. Finn and Jake each put on a headset to go talk to him in this world. They find people who have developed their own online culture and ways of living. They use it to be social, similar to VR chat. They call Finn and Jake system dumps and ask a mod to ban them. The mod turns out to be BMO though. BMO takes Finn and Jake to his dance club, where he locates Susan for them, but refuses to leave the VR world. Finn explains that everything he sees is not real though, and that he has to return to reality. BMO asks, what is real? Saying that we think the sky is blue because our eyes tell us so. The scene pays homage to a scene in The Matrix, in which Morpheus asks Neo to define reality.
What is real? How do you define real?
Is reality just what our motor functions observe? Or is it something more, something that can only be defined by our minds? But Jake doesn't entertain these thoughts, and turns off the virtual world for everyone on the island. The humans awaken from their pods in another reference to The Matrix. The humans who emerge are weak and totally disconnected from reality. This implies that at least some of them have spent their entire lives in this world. They speak nonsensically when in the real world. Finn explains that this is not the way to solve their problems though, and tells Jake to fix what he's done. Jake doesn't know how to fix it, but a few robots are able to. So the humans return to their digital world without hesitation. They are happy to be back in what they now consider home. This episode is depressing in a different way from the others. It's also the episode that is most relevant to us today, but the tale of living in a diluted version of reality has been told for thousands of years. Let's again go back to the Odyssey. The first island with Alva is reminiscent of the island of man-eating giants in the Odyssey, but the island we see here is similar to the island of the Lotus Eaters. In the story, Odysseus and his crew encountered an island of men who eat the fruit from the lotus tree. The fruit has a narcotic effect, causing the consumer to sleep in a state of extreme peace. It made you forget about your problems and forget what you truly cared about. The men who were on the island had no desire to return home to their families or do anything. All they wanted to do was remain on the island eating the lotus. Odysseus' crew dined with the people on the island, eating the fruit. Later, Odysseus had to tie his men to the ship when they left, as they had lost all motivation to return home. After having seen a life of pleasure and indulgence, the idea of dealing with the real world became a nightmare. This story is mirrored in the episode. The humans have left behind living in their city and decide to live in the VR world. Once there, it is impossible to live anywhere else. In the VR world, you can have anything, and you can avoid the problems of the real world. To me, this is the most extreme and unsettling route the humans take after the war. The land around them was in a period of darkness, so they left it behind entirely. They choose to live the most pleasurable and indulgent life possible, one based on hedonism. After enough generations, the real world was forgotten about. It is all really similar to The Matrix, but instead of being born into this digital construct and forced into the pods, The humans on the island chose this life. The robots they created only assist to keep them in the simulation. No one has any idea of leaving. Jake shutting off the entire system is similar to another Greek idea, the allegory of the cave. The allegory of the cave is a concept from the philosopher Plato, about the idea of seeing less than the truth. In this cave, other humans cast shadows on a wall with puppets. The people watching the shadows have been in the cave since childhood, but not since birth. All they know is a life of seeing the shadows. Plato then tells of a freed prisoner, someone who denied this life and left the cave. This person saw the harsh light of the outside world, and was momentarily blinded. But once his eyes adjusted, he saw the truth. He saw the sun, the trees, the springs. He felt the wind and touched the grass. These experiences allowed him to think of new ideas and develop his own philosophies. He began to pity those still in the cave. As they were looking upon an illusion of the world around them, he returned to tell the others of what was outside. But upon re-entering the cave, he could not see. His eyes could not make out what was in the darkness, as they had adjusted to the sunlight. The other prisoners saw he was blinded by the dark and assumed that the world outside had blinded him. This discouraged them from taking the same journey the freed prisoner did, and from that moment, they decided to kill anyone who ever tried to drag them from the cave. The point Plato was trying to make with this was that one's own thoughts and ideas provide an elevated form of living, that our lives were not dependent on our own senses, but on our souls. The people in the cave cannot think like this. They know life only to be what their senses tell them, only the shadows on the wall. The people in the VR world are watching the shadows. When Jake drags them out of it, they curse him and want to harm him. And for one last thought experiment, imagine an experience machine. An experience machine is the concept of being able to give someone maximum pleasure by plugging into a machine. Life in the machine would have no pain or boredom, only the most indulgent activities possible. Once in the simulated world of pleasure, you would never be able to leave due to the conditioning. Would you plug into the machine? If the answer is yes, then it means experiencing the highs of life is the great good we should all chase. If the answer is no, then maybe deep down we know there's something more to life, that pain and hardship mean more than we think, that persevering through struggles define us. The people seen in this episode choose to plug into the experience machine. Alright, this is the part of the video where it gets existential and morbid. I mean, the entire series is, but this part in particular. Because when we look around, we have to ask, how much of our own time do we spend looking at the shadows on the wall, or attempting to plug into the experience machine? How much of our lives will we now spend on phones or computers compared to life 100 years ago? We're not so different from the humans in this episode, just because we get outside a little and are not entirely in the virtual reality yet. When we endlessly scroll through TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Netflix, or any other sites, are we aware of the chains around us? More so each day, we eat the lotus fruit and indulge ourselves in pleasurable laziness. This is only going to get worse with AI art and AI-generated things. Out of nowhere, artificial intelligence has exploded. You can now see anything your eyes desire by typing in a prompt. No longer do we have to imagine. We don't even need to really think either. AI can now write and debug code based on the function you want it to perform, all while working at an infinitely faster pace than a human. It's exciting, sure, but it's also kind of scary. If I made this video 1 year ago, the singularity would seem way further away. But AI is something so exponential and complex that we struggle to understand it at the moment. Where will this intelligence be in 10 years' time? Every month at this point, there's some update to the AI's code that makes it way better. The impact this technology will bring cannot be overstated. And rest assured, some major corporations are scrambling to optimize AI in various ways. So if we already have headsets and AI, how long until we can live in a digital world that is exactly to our own design, where each person has their own domain of whatever it is that where each of these people unknowingly creates their own shadow play and grows their own lotus tree? Someday soon, the satisfaction of our senses will be enough for many. When we can satisfy our senses in any way imaginable, there will be no need to have higher thought. And when a freed prisoner does come along to tell us about the existence outside of technology, we will curse them in an attempt to stay in our cave. But despite these thought experiments, does anything really change? Will you or I go out and spend less time on our phones this week after having heard these stories? Probably not, because technology is easy and the real world is hard. That and every app on our phones has been designed to be as addictive as possible. Our phones are an escape to different places and people. Just like in Ready Player One, the world has become more ruined because people decide to live life in the oasis. And people decide to live life in the oasis because the world is ruined. There's some positives to the oasis, such as being who you really want to be, but it's still not real. And no matter how pleasurable technology becomes, what it displays will never be reality. The concept of better reality looks closer than ever now that Facebook/Meta is trying to make VR. But true virtual reality is still further down the road. Meta has been a giant disaster and is far from replacing even a Zoom call. But it does show that big corporations are trying to push the boundaries. In these sci-fi stories, there's always that one big company that controls nearly everything. Well, those companies are already real, and these companies continue to give us enticing things to experience outside of reality. When watching the episode, I wonder about the better reality company. Were they an evil corporation, or a simple business that tried to help out the humans? That question being unanswered only adds to the intrigue of this island. All the viewer knows is that one day, each human on the island was given the option to plug into the experience machine, and all of them chose to do so. At the end of the episode, Jake convinces BMO to continue their voyage. The creature in Jake's egg also hatches in a reference to the chestburster scene in Alien. And Alien is a movie about big companies, robots, and an attempted murder of humans to find a better way. But this is probably just a funny reference that I'm looking way too far into. And the last shot we see is the crew being sent to the third island. In episode 5, Finn and Jake encounter Hub Island, the third of the 4 islands. Unlike the previous 2 episodes, this one does not focus on the island or the people currently living on it. Rather, it tells the story of Martin and Minerva. These are the 2 biggest episodes for explaining Finn's origins and how he ended up alone on Ooo. But sometime between Finn's arrival on Ooo and Finn returning, Hub Island has been left to ruin. Episode 7 would later reveal why this happened. Several years after Finn had been lost, Dr. Gross's experiments became more unnatural. She thought technology and adaptation would be the answer to humanity's problems. Gross had already been giving cybernetic implants to some of her seekers, but now she was fusing animals together. In this process, she released a deadly virus. Minerva describes this as being the most catastrophic thing to happen to humanity in 300 years. The event that happened 300 years ago prior to this was likely humans trying to escape the islands, which is said to have almost destroyed them. The virus had a fatality rate of 62% in the general population, and they began to quarantine people on Founders Island. Most, if not all, of the helpers died of the virus. This led Minerva to upload her consciousness into machines, which allowed her to help the population recover. An interesting character in this episode is Dr. Gross, the one responsible for releasing the virus. Her character is taken straight from the 1896 science fiction story, The Island of Dr. MOREAU. In the story, a shipwrecked man finds an island home to a mad scientist. The scientist creates hybrid beings from humans and animals, which are called beast folk. Dr. MOREAU is later killed in a fight with one of these hybrids. Without the scientist, the beast folk begin falling back into their primitive nature and return to the natural world. The main character is able to escape the island months after the death of MOREAU. Upon his arrival back to civilization, though, he constantly feels that the people he encounters are slowly turning more primitive, just as the beast folk began to do. And while not part of the island's miniseries, it's interesting that when Finn returns to Ooo, it has mutated, and they have to return it to its original state. But among the many themes of the island of Dr. MOREAU is one relevant to the 4 islands, and that is human interference with nature. Dr. Gross heavily interferes with nature, both in animal species and in humans. She is the most responsible for the events of Hub Island, but continues her strange experiments after the virus, even claiming years later that she is creating the opposite of extinction, when she almost caused one. We see in the episode Preboot that a lifetime of installing mods has made her more machine than anything, and her collection of mutated animals has grown larger. She still has plans to give all remaining humans mods, and until her apparent death, she was firm in her belief to speed up evolution. Okay, there's an obvious example of what this virus can be compared to: the coronavirus. COVID-19 was first discovered in late 2019, and by early 2020, the world was going into a lockdown. If you became infected, there were a multitude of respiratory symptoms that could develop. It is the worst in elderly people, with the risk of death increasing based on prior patient health and age. It spreads through the air and water, and in some cases, contaminates surfaces. We now have testing, masks, and vaccines to combat it, but it was a wake-up call to the world, and the impacts of it are still ongoing, as it has disrupted the supply chain and businesses in many ways. At the time of this video being uploaded, the death toll nears 7 million worldwide. But what if the lethality was slightly higher? A virus that had this more lethal effect was the 1918 flu pandemic. About 100 years before COVID, a virus broke out right after World War I. Within 2 years, approximately 500 million people were infected, with the death toll estimated to be between 17 and 100 million. This pandemic only ended when the virus evolved to become much less deadly. But a true extinction event pandemic would be more similar to the Black Death. The Black Death or bubonic plague was not a virus, but it was responsible for around 75 to 200 million deaths in the 14th century. The cause for the plague is still disputed, but that only goes to show that pandemics can erupt from many different factors at any moment, and without the proper measures or convenient evolution, they can be detrimental to society. In this case, the solution involved Minerva uploading her consciousness to machines. This allowed her to help the remaining population with no risk of infection. And once again, this island has an interesting relationship with technology. On the first island, human technology caused the downfall of the population. On the second, humans turned to headsets to escape their reality. And here, Minerva seems to fall back on technology as a safety net. Only a few episodes before, Finn had a bionic arm installed, relying on technology just as Minerva did. Together they show the benefits that advancement could have if used in the right ways. One company that also shows this is MOREAU, originally founded on Ooo before the war. The MOREAU logo was shown on a blimp during the Founders song, suggesting that Mo's technology had an impact on helping the humans survive initially. Like Dr. Gross, Mo is mostly a cyborg, as he has lived for over 1,000 years. He is said to have created millions of moles in his lifetime. BMO was meant to take care of his son. He never started his family, but BMO was always there for Finn and Jake. Mo is the counter-argument to Dr. Gross. Gross is firm in her belief to drive human evolution with mods. Mo believes technology can be a gentle way to help humanity. He likely created some extreme measures just in case, though. When Minerva uploads her consciousness, there is a panel with a face similar to a Mo. Mo co-represents technology as a force for good and safety. It's unclear how much of the island's technology originated from his works, though. The events on this island are plausible, to say the least. In only the last 700 years, hundreds of millions have died from viruses and disease. Modern developments in medicine have helped to prevent mass outbreaks, but the potency for something catastrophic will always be present. Another one of the main themes in this episode is the pattern of human failures.
Everything repeats over and over again. No one learns anything, because no one lives long enough to see the pattern, I guess.
Here we see the humans repeat their pattern. The pattern of making cruel and unnatural things from the natural. Back then, this act released the Lich. And on the islands, this act released a virus. I mean, the Lich knows the pattern of human suffering will continue, even if he is not present. The question the humans have to answer is how do they break the cycle? The Vampire King wants to try a different route. Marceline says that the other way is like a black hole, an unknown. She wants to take the safe option, where the outcome is known, meaning the cycle repeats because people make comfortable choices rather than facing the unknown. Dr. Gross thinks she is changing things, but she insists that people stay on the islands just as the founders did. Many humans think they are making the right choice or taking the unsafe option, but they simply haven't lived long enough to see the pattern. Even those who have seen the pattern, such as Marceline or Bubblegum, continue to repeat their past actions, leading them back to where they started. If the humans decided to embrace uncertainty, perhaps they could have learned to survive on MOREAU, even with the freakish weather events that were coming. But they wanted to be on familiar ground, away from mutants of any sort. But the mutants found them, in the form of Gross's experiments, and in the form of Jake. One of these mutants was their downfall, and the other would later help them. At the end of the episode, Susan reveals they are traveling to Hub Island. She tells Finn that his mom is still alive and living there. The visit to Island 3 was brief, and the episodes were mostly flashbacks to when it was inhabited, but the theme of this one is that of repeating mistakes and trying to control nature. And the fourth and final island will present what the humans have learned from the other three. In the final episodes of Adventure Time Islands, Finn and Jake land on Founders Island. What they see is an advanced society that is living peacefully. The people are friendly and many are seen doing leisurely things. They seem genuinely happy to be living where they are. However, these humans are not very open-minded. When a man sees Jake, he immediately assumes it's a costume. It takes a child's mind to realize that Jake is actually a talking dog. The people are fascinated by him and enjoy his jokes. But once they find out he is a mutant, they are fearful. To them, anything out of the ordinary is synonymous with danger. And on this island, there is no danger. Minerva bots have made it so that people are extremely sheltered from almost any form of harm. It doesn't take long for Finn to find one of these robots. He has an interaction with it, but finds out that it's not his mom. One of these bots takes a blood sample from Finn.
Where are the bones?
That's my hand.
And the network of robots realize they have found the true son of Minerva. Finn is led to a room that houses the robots, and in this room he is able to speak to the consciousness of his mom. She is overjoyed to see her son again, but Finn is confused why she must talk through a screen. Minerva explains the history of Hub Island and Founders Island. After the explanation, she insists that Finn and Jake stay on the island. If they tried to leave now, they would just die anyway. This prompts a conversation about danger and the outside world. Jake says people need danger in order to grow. To Minerva, this makes little sense. She knows leaving the island is never to be considered anymore, and the Guardian would prevent any attempt. But Finn does not live in fear of the Guardian or anything in his way, so he leaves to convince others to join him on the voyage back to MOREAU. He tells the citizens about a life of danger and free will, one where life is not a constant emotion. There are days that are good and days that are bad. As humans, we have a desire to explore, have experiences, and learn new things. To Minerva's surprise, people start to listen to Finn and agree with him. So she makes an executive decision to upload the brain of everyone on the island to the machine world. To prevent this, Finn decides to upload only his consciousness to save everyone else. Before doing so, he shows his mom the world he lives in, particularly the good it taught him. She is surprised that he has learned to be a helper in a land she sees as chaotic. After reconsideration, she decides to stop the upload and let anyone who chooses to leave do so. She even assists with taking down the Guardian. The lesson in this episode is that of free will and safety, and this theme loops back around to the first episode, with the little girl in the sandcastle. Perhaps one of the most famous stories on this topic is A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. In the book, a young criminal named Alex is made to be capable of only good by means of new technology. He has lost any ability to do harm, and the government displays him as the new model reformed prisoner. It's important to note that afterward he does not always choose to do good. Rather, he is compelled to stay away from anything bad, due to the fear and sickness that have been imposed on him. but some in the story believe this brainwashing to be immoral. They say that the man lacks any free will. The story asks questions about the value of choice. Would a lack of choice for some be necessary to ensure safety? Or is it better for people to have options, even when they choose options that could hurt others? The argument is that without the ability to make choice, we become like a clockwork orange, something organic on the outside, but mechanical on the inside. Without free will, we cease to be truly human. The humans on this island have no real choice. Not everyone naturally enjoys the island because of how great life is there. Rather, they are compelled to choose life on the island out of fear. I mean, at one point, there was an underground market for people wanting to escape. If you were caught trying to escape, you were sent to re-education and forced to watch films in another reference to A Clockwork Orange. This is best seen with Frida. She wanted to explore the outside world, but being stopped by Susan and the threat of the Guardian forced her to stay on the island. After enough time had passed, she grew to accept her situation. And this confuses Susan, who knows Frida was once the most ambitious person she knew. Now she is someone deprived of free will, with little interest in her dreams. Luckily, Finn's speech renews her interest in the outside world, and her dreams to explore end up being fulfilled. No one else decides to go to UU right away, but Finn is okay with this. People are free to choose safety, as long as they have the choice. Minerva initially prioritizes safety over choice. As a helper on Founder's Island, she has been taught to think this way. She praises the Guardian and insists that he is necessary. In her mission to make people safe, though, she led them to a life of extreme comfort. As explained by Finn and as shown by the Better Reality Island, comfort leads to a lack of growth in people. In her most controlling state, she is about to force extreme safety measures on everyone. Finn has to step in and stop the process. And of course, what is the basis of this safety? Technology. Technology and safety are the major themes of the entire series. Every island sought safety through technological advancement. Controlling weather, virtual reality, mods, robotic helpers, guardians. Every group tried to ensure safety. What this led to was loneliness, a lost sense of reality, disease, and the death of free will. But they turned to this technology out of fear. To be more exact, fear of the unknown. These people were not afraid to live on UU. They were afraid that life on UU would be unfamiliar. In a famous episode of The Twilight Zone, Rod Serling explores this type of fear through an old woman. The woman has become isolated, living on a figurative island of her own. She does not allow any guests inside of her house because she fears that one of them is going to be death. In a panic, she allows a wounded man to enter the house for recovery, though. She later discovers that this man is death, and he explains what she is truly afraid of, which is not death itself.
Is it me you're afraid of? You understand me. What you're afraid of is the unknown.
By the end of the episode, the visitor guides her into the unknown, and she happily follows him. As Rod Serling put it,
there was an old woman who lived in a room, and like all of us was frightened of the dark, but who discovered in a minute last fragment of her life that there was nothing in the dark that wasn't there when the lights were on. Object lesson for the more frightened amongst us, in or out of the Twilight Zone.
This episode tackles the theme of islands really well. For hundreds of years, no visitors were ever allowed onto the islands, but when the visitors finally arrive, they lead people back with them into the darkness. Their fear of the unknown had been driving them to make poor choices until there were no choices. Ironically, they failed to evolve, as Dr. Gross was forcing some to do, but they didn't need to evolve to be more advanced. They had to evolve to the new world around them. They were attempting to carry over their old lives and society into a world that was fundamentally different after the war. They could not accept a change in the pattern out of uncertainty, and the mechanical masterpiece of their fear was the Guardian. The Guardian is a cybernetic creature that works below the water around the islands. It protects the waters from any travelers no matter which direction they want to go. And water in this context is used to represent distance. There is a distance that comes with life on these islands. Finn and Jake experience this when sailing there. The journey is long and hazardous. Even the 4 islands can be disconnected from themselves due to the ocean. Water and the ocean are meant to show distance several times throughout the series. Frida looks at the infinite ocean and wonders what is just beyond it. Finn does the same at the end of the first episode. Minerva does this when she loses Finn, knowing that she cannot get past the Guardian. She simply gazes at the ocean, hoping that somewhere out there Finn is safe. Her consciousness is even displayed on a platform surrounded by water. She now lives on an island of her own. It's a sad representation of the loneliness she feels in the machine world, and without her son. To talk to her, Finn literally has to swim across a small moat, and what lies below the water he swims in? The machines that source the robots. There is something to be said here about how these technologies distance us from places, but also from emotions. After all, these people live on an island, a tiny slice of the real world. Everyone among them in some way is isolated, and to ensure this would never change, they built a technological terror to stalk the seas. Instead of dealing with intruders on a case-by-case basis, they instead prevent any interaction with the outside world. Another case of humans depriving themselves of choice. I like to think that among those hundreds of years on the islands, good-hearted people tried to visit them, but were stopped. People such as Finn and Jake, but they assumed nothing good would ever be out there when they built the Guardian. Over the years, only a few people ever got past it, and I like how almost every major character had a part in defeating it, including Finn's dad, whose opening of the eye allowed them to later beat it. For some of them, the Guardian was a source of trauma, and together they overcame that unnatural force holding them back. It was the moment that unified the people hurt by what they thought was protecting them. At the end of the series, after the Guardian is defeated, the crew sails back to UU. But what's next for the humans? As said before, no one other than Frida decided to leave the islands alongside Finn and Jake. But if we fast forward to the series finale, a large ship of humans is seen sailing back to UU, which includes the consciousness of Minerva. These people have crossed the ocean. They have closed the distance between themselves and their fear of the unknown. They made the uncomfortable choice, which might have temporarily broken the pattern they were repeating. The islands were home to a human civilization that chose comfort. For 1,000 years, these people experienced little growth, as they lived without the emotions essential for it. But they can now become more on UU. And to see what life on UU means, just look at Finn. He embraces uncertainty and new adventurous locations. He once feared the ocean, but now he finds peace in it. Maybe all of the islanders learned to be adventurous and optimistic about what they didn't understand. In fact, we know some did just that, because we can look even further than the series finale. In Lemon Hope Part 2, we see Lemon Hope walking through UU 1,000 years after the events of Adventure Time, and we see human cities fused with candy constructions. This means that the humans and the candy people learned to coexist. The islanders understood that mutants didn't always mean danger. They could have built an isolated city on UU, but instead they chose to embrace this new world. Something is wrong here though. It's all in ruin, and we never get a clear answer as to what happened. It is possible that humans built a new city with the pups, which become a dominant species in this future, or maybe they repeated their pattern of war and fled from their fears again. I think it's a question best left unanswered, as it adds intrigue. And while this might not be a totally fulfilling ending, it's nice to know that in the moment, the humans overcame the forces holding them back. That for a while, Finn and his mom could talk when they wanted to, and the humans could experience the full range of emotion once more. Adventure Time Islands is about a civilization losing itself to the horrors of war, about people turning to desperate measures to avoid the fear that comes with uncertainty, but ultimately learning that fear is what allows us to grow. And after enough time, they accept this fact and return to the land they fled from all those years ago. The series ends with Finn looking upon the horizon once more. The sun is setting on his adventure. He puts on a better reality headset, embracing a technology that has had ill effects. But in this better reality, he is with his mom again. They hug and he asks if this is really her. Meaning, is her consciousness still the same as when she was human? She replies,
I don't know for sure, but I feel like it's me. I hope that's enough.
And while the simulation of her consciousness is holding on to his bionic arm, it disappears. The distance between their locations have become too big. A single tear is seen falling from under the headset. And I mean, come on. This is animation, man. This is why I love this show. Every time I finish watching Islands, I feel that I've just watched some of the best consecutive episodes ever aired on Cartoon Network. The last frame is of the ocean from Finn's perspective, perhaps reminding us to go confront our own fears and to have our own adventures. If you made it this far, I really thank you so much for watching. The Islands miniseries is something I really love, and I'd be glad to talk about it in the comments below. Thank you to Opus Science Collective, aka OSC, for creating all the music used in this series. Be sure to go check out their channel. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe, and I hope you've enjoyed your stay in the Cartoon Corner.